I will get over this eventually. Welcome in. Monday edition, Orange and Blue Today. Cecil Lammey with Andrew Mason via video. Mace is here in spirit. What's up, Mace? Broncos country is here to talk about this game. You're going to hear Andrew Mason's thoughts. You're going to hear a dash of my thoughts. You've heard a lot from me. 4 hours on the air today, hour on the air last night on the post-game show. And I'm still ticked off about the Broncos losing to the Kansas City Chiefs and the manner in which they did. What went wrong? It's the discussion today that we will have, checking y'all from the chat room as well, because this game was incredibly disappointing. Now, there is plenty of silver linings, okay? Nobody should be terribly down. I said I'm going to be mad today, still mad, and I'll get over it. I'll be all right. Tomorrow will be a better day. But you learned a lot about this team, the grit coming from this squad. Broncos defense being able to hang with the Chiefs offense that played well, but they shut them down in the red zone. Bo Nix going toe-to-toe with Pat Mahomes. You did learn a lot from these Denver Broncos. Going forward, what more do you need to see? More Audric Estime, more people not named Courtland Sutton, like Sutton continue to force feed him the ball. Like, lots of things to go over. But let's hear from Andrew Mason. He's still in Kansas City as time of recording. So let's kick back and hear from one Andrew Mason, and he'll give us his thoughts on what happened against Kansas City.
Well, thank you, Cease. I'm still here in the Kansas City area. I haven't headed back to Denver just yet. You've got the Sean Payton conference call every Monday morning and then player conference calls. And let's start with the Sean Payton conference call from this morning. And right off the top, he was asked about what went wrong on the missed field goal, or I should say the blocked field goal at the end, where protection gave way on the left side and Will Lutz didn't really have much of a chance. Here's what Sean Payton had to say when initially addressing the fateful kick.
Look, I think fair question, and we're constantly each week making corrections, not just with the field goal unit, with the offense, with a certain protection, with a certain coverage. And so, and look, when something like that happens, and it's not the first, like it could be a trick play or it could be whatever. It's pretty common for the team that had success with it to say, hey, we saw, and credit them for that. They exploited an area that we obviously felt was fixed and stronger, and yet not fixed enough.
So what he gets into right there, saying he thought it was fixed but not fixed enough, this tells you that certainly it was a concern, the left side of the place kick protection. As I wrote at denversports.com and posted on social media on Sunday night, Alex Forsythe had been knocked to the ground 5 times on place kicks in the previous 2 games. All 4 place kicks against the Panthers, all were extra points. He was knocked to the ground. He was also knocked to the ground once in Baltimore last week, and then again on 3 of 4 kicks knocked to the ground on Sunday. So it's not something of which the Broncos were unaware based on what Sean Payton is saying, but clearly the glitch was not fixed. But we know Alex Forsythe was the player who went down, and he was at the flashpoint of what the Chiefs were doing in trying to breach the Broncos' place kick protection unit. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was all on Alex Forsythe.
This isn't on the player. This is on all of us. This is on us as coaches. We've got to continue to look at, are we big enough stature-wise there for that, and understanding how the rush was coming. So it's disappointing, and yet it's not something that's new when a big play is made at the end of a game.
So talking about the stature of Alex Forsythe, I find myself flashing back to training camp when we had the competition with Alex Forsythe, Luke Wattenberg, and of course Sam Mustipher, the veteran, was also in there as well, going for the center position. And Forsythe did some things well, but there were times when he got overpowered. So seeing him get overpowered there by the Chiefs on Sunday, if you'd been watching training camp and watching the offensive line work, it didn't come as much of a surprise because there were times when he was bowled back. And of course, Leo Chenal of the Kansas City Chiefs said that they thought they could get the bull rush in that spot of the line, and they did. It was the worst possible time for the Broncos, and that was it. Of course, there are some who want to talk about Will Lutz's culpability in this. Here's what Lutz had to say about the kick at the end of the game.
Yeah, felt good, but, not a moral victory. Their ball didn't go through the uprights. Job is to put the ball through the uprights.
Lutz, to his credit, didn't point fingers. And the interesting thing and the notable thing about the Broncos and the strength of association and character that they possess as a team is that you didn't see any pointing fingers in the locker room after the game Sunday. It was definitely a downcast locker room. It was probably the most devastated I've seen a Broncos team after a game since the divisional round playoff loss to the Ravens all the way back in January of 2013. Yes, more devastated than even Super Bowl 48. And part of the reason was the suddenness of the Ravens game going to double overtime compared with how the destruction in Super Bowl 48 unfolded at a rather stately pace to where basically everyone in that locker room could have spent the entire second half processing the one that got away, the chance to get it done on the largest stage in the Super Bowl and falling short. When it hits you in that moment, there's a palpable sense of shock, and certainly there were players who felt that in the moments after the game. But at the same time, that can be a healthy thing if it doesn't wreck you, if you use it as fuel. It can be okay to sit in that shock and even marinate in it for a day or two before full on getting back to work.
Sean been in a lot of these, man, from Minnesota to the Rams game. Just gotta keep chopping wood, man. Games like this supposed to hurt. We see the faces on everybody in this locker room, man. It's supposed to hurt because we so invested, man. Everybody come work the tail off every day, man, and we see it, man. And if you're not invested in it, it wouldn't feel this way. It wouldn't feel this bad, man. But we know where we want to go. We know where we're trying to go. We know what we're fighting to do. At the end of the day, we got to keep showing up and keep going and working, man. We got to give this city something to be proud of, man. And we got to get the job done.
Speaks of how invested the players are. And respectfully to other Broncos teams of recent vintage, they've lost tough games. Okay, maybe not in the circumstances as tough as this one, but there have been some tough losses. I think back to blowing a 3-score lead in Minnesota back in November of 2019. Broncos had a great chance for an upset and couldn't close the deal in the second half. I think of the Kansas City game in 2018 at home on Monday Night Football when Case Keenum overthrew the late Demaryius Thomas down the right sideline there to keep the Broncos from what would have been a game-winning touchdown. I think of losing to the Texans and Browns at the ends of games that year as well. And it's not that those Broncos weren't downbeat, but it wasn't anything tonally or emotionally like what we saw after the game. This hurts, but if you can use that pain as fuel going forward to say, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And that's where you also heard a lot of in the locker room players talking about, hey, this is what I could have done. This is what difference I could have made. Because there are so many opportunities to not have it come down to a field goal. Broncos offense in the second half until that late drive by Bo Nix, who did a great job. Bo Nix, the highest passer rating for a rookie quarterback going on the road to Arrowhead Stadium in a game that the Chiefs had their starters out there forever. The only higher passer rating was Justin Herbert going against the Chiefs scrubs back in January of 2021 to end his rookie season. There were a lot of things that went well, but the offense, until that late drive, and tip of the cap to Bo Nix, Audric Estime, everyone else on that offense that delivered in the clutch and showed that with these rookies and these young players playing an awful lot, the kids are going to be all right around here as they get more playing time and they grow. You still had an offense that at times went backwards. You had 2 sacks in the game that had 33 yards in losses. How do you prevent those? How do you get back to where the sacks aren't damaging, aren't drive destroying because of the magnitude of the yardage that is lost? How do you take advantage of the opportunities that you have? How do you take advantage of the opportunity that comes because your defense, for the 3rd time in a row, held Patrick Mahomes and company to under 20 points? The Broncos defense has allowed only 2 touchdowns to Mahomes and company in the last 3 games in the series. 1 touchdown in the first game in October of 2023. No touchdowns when the Chiefs came to Denver for the return match that the Broncos won. And then 1 touchdown on Sunday. The Broncos have figured things out against the Chiefs. They figured out this offense. They're holding them to nearly 10 points below their average since the start of the 2023 season. So that ought to be good enough to win. And yet you're sitting here talking about the Broncos being 5-5, the Chiefs still being unbeaten. Yeah, maybe the pixie dust is going to fall off the Chiefs at some point and fall onto the Broncos. These things do have a way of evening out. They just don't necessarily even out in the course of a season sometimes because while an NFL season is long in terms of calendar length, it's short in terms of games. It's not baseball. There's not 162 games to normalize things. You got 17, and that's it. And that may not be enough time for things to normalize for the Chiefs and see some regression to the mean that it seems like they're flirting with right now. Broncos, on the other hand, there may be some ascension to the mean coming, and we might see that as soon as next Sunday, a big game against the Atlanta Falcons. And as Cecil and I have told you about here many times, talking about Orange and Blue today, it's a 3-game stretch. Point to the 3 games, not just the 2 games. And if you get one of the 3 against teams that are likely headed to the playoffs, you ought to feel good about yourself. Well, here come the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons have given the Broncos a lot of trouble over the years. In fact, the Broncos have only 1 win over the Falcons since 2001. For whatever reason, Atlanta, spanning the eras, has had Denver's number. The only game the Broncos have won against the Falcons since 2000 actually being the last game the Broncos won. The only time that the Broncos have beaten the Falcons since then was the Spencer Larson game. Of course, Spencer Larson starting on both offense and defense back in the 2008 season. Broncos winning that game at the Georgia Dome. But they lost at the Georgia Dome in 2012. They lost in Denver, Paxton Lynch's first start in 2016. They lost in Atlanta, Drew Locke unable to rally the team from a huge deficit in the fourth quarter in 2020. And then going all the way back to 2004, they lost that game in Denver, a game where Darius Watts dropped a potential touchdown pass, and Michael Vick probably had the best game of his years as an Atlanta Falcon. So historically, you have a team that's brought you some problems, and it's also a team that, very similar to the Baltimore Ravens, perhaps, is going to come in mad after losing a game to a rival. Baltimore, of course, lost to Cleveland before coming in and throttling the Broncos. Atlanta lost to New Orleans. They're bitter blood rivals from all the way back in the mid-1960s, a game that they're kicking themselves about. So you're not going to get an Atlanta Falcons team that's going to come in here on an emotional lull. You're going to get a Falcons team that's ticked off. But you should get a Broncos team that's ticked off as well. And that can be a healthy thing. And look, an awful lot went right, just not enough. Here's Mike McGlinchey talking about some of the things that went right in this response.
I thought we played a pretty good game today. Obviously, there was more than one opportunity to get ahead in that game that we didn't take advantage of early in the second half. unfortunately, that's the way football goes. And, we did a great job there in both situational drives at the end of the half. Unfortunately, that penalty cost us probably the 5 yards for the field goal. And then they make an unbelievable play after a 6-minute drive to close out the game. I mean, it's really all you can ask for as an offensive line, as an offense. But championship teams make championship type plays, and that's why they're the reigning world champs. And we got to make sure we make that next one the next time.
And that next time could come next week against the Atlanta Falcons. It's going to be a test of resiliency and toughness for the Broncos, but it's one that Sean Payton, for one, thinks they can pass.
This team has been resilient, so the sky isn't falling. Relative to our season, the schedule, we're sitting here 5-5. Obviously, we'd love to have been 6-4 with a win yesterday, but the focus shifts, quickly to the next game. I like the leadership on this team. Someone asked about that yesterday. It's an entirely different team than a year ago. It's tough. It's tough mentally and physically. And, we've got to have a good week of practice here coming up for Atlanta. But overcoming a tough loss, when you talk to the players about that, you tell them that, hey, that's going to happen periodically in your career, and you hope that you have a few of those games that maybe you thought you didn't deserve to win that you did win. And you've got to bounce back either way.
I appreciate what he's saying about this year's team being tough, comparing it to last year's, but let's not forget last year's team did go on a 5-game winning streak after starting 1-5. I don't think last year's team was completely lacking in toughness either. It's a different type of team this year, different makeup, some of the same players, obviously, some key ones different, including the quarterback. But I don't want to have the revisionist history and say that last year's team wasn't cut of some tough timber, because they did turn a 1-5 start, this type of start that typically dooms a team to irrelevance, into being very much in the playoff mix before losing 3 games in 4 weeks in December before getting it back on New Year's Eve against the injury-depleted Chargers. So just want to say that. But I would offer that because the Broncos did fight their way out of a 1-5 start last year, that they've already proven that they can turn it around and get back into a race. And certainly they hope they see it starting Sunday in Atlanta. That's it from here in Kansas City. I'm about to head to the airport. Cease, appreciate you. I'll talk to you back in Denver tomorrow.
Appreciate you, buddy. There goes Andrew Mason. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the magic of technology. Mace checking in before he's got to head to the airport. I'm checking in and feeling a little bit better. We're going to talk about silver linings this entire week. We're going to get you ready for the Falcons better than anybody. But in order to do what we need to do, I have a simple request for the chat room. And for anyone out there that's watching this show that appreciates the work that Mason and I do. We put a lot of work into this program. We put a lot of work into this YouTube channel, and we appreciate you all for your support. We have a specific number that we need to hit before the end of the year for subscriber count. And about 48% of you that watch are not yet subscribed. So I'm going to ask, because I need to ask, we need to hit that number. Please subscribe to our channel, and we appreciate you for that. We're going to bring you the best insight about the Denver Broncos. We're going to have boots on the ground. Mace is going to be at every game. We're going to be in the locker room. We're going to be talking to players, talking to coordinators. It's what you expect from OBT. It's why it is a BFD. So Rick is Rick. He's following for a long time, my man. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. We appreciate you guys. DH30, thank you for that as well. Let's believe in Bo. And let's go Broncos, man. Let's get back on the winning track. Can they do it against Atlanta? It's part of the conversation, and we'll continue the silver linings talk there as well. For the great Andrew Mason, I'm Cecil Lammey saying, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And if you've commented in the chat room, comment down below We appreciate you for that. OBT's BFD, thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.